In this video, we're going to turn this area right here into a sliding trash can cabinet so the trash can will be hidden and the animals can't get into it. So the first thing I'm going to have to do is build a kick panel to go across from here to there where it's missing the cabinet. So we're going to take a measurement, see how wide it needs to be. Looks like about 15 9/16. And we also need to measure how high it's supposed to be. And it looks like we're right at 3.5 inches. And you don't have to get a nice poplar board like what I've got here, but I wanted the front of the cabinet edge to be nice. I know it's going to get painted, but I still want it to be made out of something that's decent that I didn't have to do too much work to. So I got a piece of poplar board here, so we're going to start by cutting it on a miter saw to the length that we need. I'm actually going to go just a little bit longer than what we need. We needed 15 9/16, so I'm going to go ahead and cut this to 16 inches. Now that we've got our board cut to length, we're going to go ahead and rip this down on the table saw so where we'll get our 3.5 inches going this way. Alright, so to start we're going to raise the blade height to get it just past the height of our board so we know we can cut it all the way through. Next, I want to get the distance from the fence to the edge of our saw blade on this side. My table saw does have these markings on it, inch marks on it, but I like using my tape measure since that's what I measured my board with, just to make sure that I get it set the same. And what I'm going to do is measure at the front and then go ahead and clamp it down. Make sure I get my 3.5 inches just to the edge of that saw blade tooth. Clamp it in place. And then I'm going to move my tape measure to the back of the blade and make sure it's at least 3.5. It's okay if it's a little bit wider because the board's usually split out on this table saw. That'll go out to the side a little bit, so it should be good. Now we'll go ahead and cut the board. Now we're going to make our final cut on this piece here. What I'm going to do is measure from the end that we cut earlier on the miter saw, because that should be a perpendicular cut on this board from what we made. And this edge over here that was the factory edge is a little bit rough, so we're going to cut off this part that's a little bit rough. Now that we've got our board cut, we're going to drill a couple of pocket holes in there. Now, we looked at the facing. This side's pretty smooth, and this other side here has a couple marks in it. So we're going to use this side that has a couple marks in it as the side that we're going to drill the pocket holes in, because they won't be shown once you put it in the cabinet. Now that we got our pocket holes drilled in this, 2 on each side, we'll go ahead and take this inside and get it in the cabinet and screw it into place. So the next thing I'm going to do is build a shelf right here on top of this. So in order to do that though, I'm going to need some support underneath it. So I'm going to build a board to go from here to the back on both sides to support our shelf. Okay, so I did a little bit of work off camera here. I built this box for the trash can to sit in, and I made this board here just for the bottom of the cabinet in case something got past this box. It would sit on the bottom of this cabinet. I do have these drawer slides here that eventually we'll use to mount this drawer. But I put 2 coats of polyurethane, a water-based polyurethane, on this cabinet base here, and also on the box, just to protect it in case something does happen. And since this is going to be holding a trash bin, we want to make sure that if something got spilled on this box or on this bottom of the cabinet, that it would be easy to clean up. So that's why the polyurethane is on there. But also, in order to support this bottom shelf, I did make some supports and got them screwed into place there on both sides. And all I did was I used just some scrap wood, put some pocket holes in them, and then I screwed them to both the front and the back. And I will show you the rest of the installation as we go along. Most cabinets, this one included, has this little lip here on either side where the facing was put on. So in order to install the drawer slides, I'm going to have to get a board that'll mount flush on either side. So we're going to start by measuring and see how thick we need to make the boards. Get about a 1/2 inch on this side. And just under a full inch on this side. I'm about a 1/16 inch shy, so 15/16. I got my boards cut that are going to go on the sides here. I'm going to put some glue on them, and then I've decided to brad nail them in place. I like using the Titebond 3. I've used it on many woodworking projects. In fact, I built my dining room table with it several years ago, and it's still holding really well. So I'll probably continue using that on most of my projects. So I got 2 scrap boards here. They're both 3/4 of an inch thick. So this will space my drawer slide up about 1.5 inches off of the bottom here. This part here is level. May not look like it in the video, but I did level this part out here. So setting these 2 boards on here that are both flat should make my drawer slide level. I've got a piece of 1/4 inch plywood that I cut and set underneath the box. That will give me a little bit of spacing to keep the box from riding on this bottom shelf here when we're pulling it in and out. So I'm going to start by putting the front screw in here. I'm going to pull the drawer and slide out just enough, get this front screw put in here, and then we'll work on getting the rest of the drawer slides screwed onto the drawer. Now we got the drawer slides installed. It's a little tough to get started pulling out, but that's because these are the heavy duty drawer slides with that little soft close feature. With a soft close feature, it makes it hard to get started pulling it out. Once you get past the springs that hold it in though, it pulls out pretty easy, smooth. So you want about a 1/2 inch overlap on each side when you're making your drawer front. So I'm going to put about a 1/2 inch there. So I want this drawer front to be 16.5 inches. And I want it to be flush with the bottom of this and come up over this, but I want to try to match this top right here. So we're going to measure this side. And put them right at 30.5 inches, what I need to make the height on this. So I forgot to show this on camera, but when I was off camera, I made this frame out of poplar. Poplar was the straightest boards that I could find at the local hardware store, which is the Blue Box store. And the existing cabinets, I want to try to match the style as close as I can. To match the style of the existing cabinets as close as possible, they have this curve cut out on both the top and bottom. So I've got this tool that's pretty handy that my wife got me for Christmas. I was able to lay that on the cabinets and trace out the pattern onto these boards and cut it out to where it would fit pretty nice. That way you get a repeatable pattern by using this tool to mark it on your boards. I cut a piece of plywood to put on the back of this. It's a little bit longer than what I need, but that's good. I'm going to end up cutting these in square after I get this glued together anyway. So I'm going to go ahead and glue this frame onto that plywood, and then we'll continue on. I put blue tape on the face of this board to protect it while I'm cutting it. I'm going to run it through my table saw to square up these two edges. And then since I've got the plywood hangover on the back of this thing, I'm going to go ahead and flip it over onto its face and use my circular saw and this straight edge guide that I've got here to square up the ends. Now that we've got the edges trimmed, I'm going to make some marks on the back here. Got to figure out where the spacing meets the plywood so that we can put a mark there so that we can trim these off flush and square. I'm going to use a framing square to make some marks across here, and then I'm going to figure out how far I need to set our edge guide here to use a saw and go ahead and cut these off. So I've got my framing square, I've got my speed square and a pencil. I'm going to go ahead and transfer where the edges of these boards are onto the back of this with my little T-square. Go ahead and do that. Set it up on its edge. So we can mark where the edges of the boards are. Got a sharp pencil. I just sharpened it. And then we just want to transfer that mark onto the back of the board. I want to do that on both sides. Alright, so that's this side. I want to do it on the other side as well. That way, when I set my framing square up here, it's squared up on one edge. I can see if the boards are different on each end. And if they are, I can put it on the one that's on the most inside in order to make our cut. So as I was mentioning before, this side right here, you can see two marks. The mark that I marked from the face where that board meets up, and the second mark is inside it. That's because the board on this side, on the front, that facing board was in just a little bit further than what that one was, so I used that mark that was on this side in order to square this up. I'm going to be using a circular saw and this edge guide that I've got in order to square up the ends here. So the way this works, it's got this little lever on the end that you push this up against your board. When you squish this lever, it'll squeeze these two parts here together, and that'll lock this clamp onto your piece of wood, and then you can run your circular saw down the edge of it. You see I've got it clamped down right here. I'm going to give this a little shake to see if this moves. It doesn't move. I've got a couple of clamps on the back of my table saw holding the board to my table saw tabletop, and that'll give me the support I need to go ahead and run the circular saw down the edge. These two pieces right here are what I just cut off the end of that cabinet door that we're making, and as you can see, it's not very thick. About an 1/8 inch off the poplar board is what we cut, and the thicker part there is the plywood that was on the back of it that we cut off. We didn't need to take off too much. We're just trying to square up the ends of it right now, and since I don't have a cross-cut sled for my table saw, this is the method that I had to use. Now, it looks pretty good now with the edges squared up, but I've still got a couple more steps that I want to do to this in order to make it match the cabinets that we've currently got in our kitchen, as close as that I can do. I'm not sure if I've got the right bit, but I think about a 1 inch inside of here, they've got a taper that's going down from the inside to the outside, and I'm going to try to figure out how I can do that. I don't have a router bit that exactly fits the edge profile of the cabinets that are in there, so this is the best way that I could figure out how to do this with the tools that I've got. Is I've got my table saw blade set at 10 degrees. It gives me a bevel like this right here, and then after I do that on all 4 sides of this cabinet door, then I can go ahead and round it over with the sander, sand all the edges, and I'll have to fill them holes and stuff with some wood filler to get the final finish. It's going to be painted, so I don't think I need to put a veneer on the edge. Well, my fence apparently is not adjusted correctly, so I'm going to have to slide it over just a hair more to try to get the correct profile that I'm looking for. Now this is what I'm looking for right here. I want a little bit of lip standing up right there, and then the angle down. That'll come close to matching the other cabinets that are in there, as long as I round off the edges when I'm done. Well, that didn't turn out perfect. There's some few imperfections here on the cut. It's kind of hard with such a tall, heavy board to keep this straight on the table saw whenever we're cutting it across. See on the bottom here, I've got this mark that's up a little bit higher, some marks that went into the board a little bit here, and up here I've got some similar marks that the table saw cut in a little bit. It also cut into the metal screws that were in here holding these 2 boards together, pocket screws that I put in there. So I think though, with some sanding and some wood filler, we can make this look alright, especially it's going to be painted, so to me wood filler is acceptable to use on this. But that's a similar profile to what the face of our other doors have on them, except they're a little bit rounded right here, and on the edges they're rounded over. So I'm going to give that a shot, see if we can fill in all the holes and stuff with wood filler, and then we'll do a sanding on this, and then see how it looks. Now we're going to wait for this wood filler to dry before trying to sand it to its final shape, and I think it'll turn out pretty good. I do recommend wearing gloves if you're going to use wood filler, and especially if you're going to rub it in with your hands like what I just did here. I tried to rub it in real good around the edges to fill any holes in the plywood and the gaps between the plywood and the boards, the poplar boards that we got up here. And I also tried to fill in on the top here some of the marks from the saw that I made when I was cutting this. So hopefully when we get to the point where we can sand this, we can make the edge profile turn out real nice. Now it's time for everybody's favorite part of every woodworking job, sanding. I've got 120 grit sandpaper here and this oak block. I'm going to go ahead and use that, just wrap it around the block. Try to get these edges straight right here while I'm sanding. Just work it back and forth. Now that I've got this sanded, Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to drill the holes to mount the hardware. Just going to have a pole on it. I'm going to match the other cabinets that are in there. The way that they're mounted inside on the other cabinets is centered inside the opening here, which I've got about 11.5, so that'll be 5 3/4. I want to make a couple marks here from this same edge, 5 3/4. Try to keep it straight. And then also from the top center of this, it was 2 3/4 and 5 3/4 where I need to drill my holes at. So now that I got that marked, I need to get the straight edge. And using my straight edge of my square here, I can go ahead and draw my straight line this way to get the center of my holes. So it's going to be right here and right here. So I'm going to drill a 3/16 inch hole at both of those locations in order to mount the door pull. I like to drill the holes in there before it's painted, and that way you can go ahead and run a little bit of sandpaper over there and clean up the rough edges. Don't necessarily have to get the pencil marks off of it because your paint should hide the pencil marks. But if you're using a Sharpie or a marker to mark this, it'll show right through the paint. So you would have to sand that off if you use Sharpie. I don't recommend using Sharpie. I would use a pencil. Okay, now it's time to take this inside. We're going to use this as our top because that's where the drawer pull is going to be. And we'll go ahead and get it mounted onto the drawer. Now the next thing I'm going to do is drill some 3/16 inch holes through this face of this drawer here. That way we can run some screws from the inside out to mount our drawer face. I'm going to go over those holes that I just drilled with a little bit of sandpaper, take off the rough edges, and then I'll work on gluing up the face to that and putting the screws in. I've got some clamps that I'm going to be using to clamp it to hold it in place, and hopefully it'll all work out well. In order to help me try to line this up, I put some blue tape on the top of the drawer here, found the center, and marked that. And I also put a mark in the center on this board right here, 7 inches right here from the bottom. That should be about where the top of the drawer ends up coming. So I should be able to put the glue on the front of this at this point, put some clamps on there, and then line it up. Having to put screws in to hold it in place. Clamps weren't working out very well for me. So this is the final reveal before painting it and putting on the hardware. So let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Well guys, I think that'll wrap up this video. We finished our trash can bin here. Please let me know in the comments below, do you think I did a good enough job matching the existing cabinet doors? Also, let me know what you'd like to see in future videos. Also, if you haven't yet, hit the subscribe button, give me that thumbs up, and don't forget to hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on future content coming from my channel. Actual person! and a little bit of Rosie. A little bit of Rosie.